Grapes are so fucking good. Good morning, guys. It is May 29th, and we are trending back down. Today's weigh-in was 197. I just spent a number of days stalled out at 198 after popping up from 193, kind of inexplicably. And honestly, it's made me kind of just like look at the whole thing. And I don't mean specifically sugar fasting. I'm talking about weight loss. I'm talking about losing 150 pounds and keeping it off since 2021. And I'm talking about what made me give this a shot to begin with. Because when you start getting some wild results doing sugar fast, it's really easy to get caught up in the miasma. It's really easy to get caught up in the energy, especially with all of the positive comments, especially you motherfucking haters in the comments, especially all of the big old Philadelphia Kensington pothole, especially with all the great energy and vibes from people like Emma, Latchkey, Sugar Punch, all frucked up, Skeleton City, you know, the big dogs, Mark Bell, you got Josh Rayner, you got Cole Robinson. It's real easy to get caught up in the motherfucking vibes right now because people are crushing it. People are shedding weight. People are posting daily. People are losing weight. And it's easy to get sucked up into that. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, let's keep the vibes going, you know? And in doing so, in getting caught up in that, it's real easy to forget about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when I was dying on a reverse diet, eating 1,800 calories, titrating up from 1,300. That's a fancy bodybuilding word. Moving up from 1,300 calories over the course of 3-4 weeks to 1,800 and rapidly gaining body fat, watching it week after week over the course of 3-4 weeks, just bubbling out, and then feeling awful, pounding energy drinks, popping exotic stims like Lipodrine, Wildfire pre-workout, the Dark Horse pre-workout, or the Dark Labs pre-workouts like Crack Gold and Alpha Yo twice a day while fasted in order to cut the water weight and to crush the appetite with anxiety. It's real easy to forget about all that stuff. And so yesterday I was doing some soul searching. I want to shout out a friend that I've been in contact with who's really crushing it right now, named Gator Dad Steve on Twitter. Dude's absolutely crushing it, getting down to 7% body fat. He was already a lean guy, started sugar fasting. He's real meticulous with it. He's real plugged in with the Cole method. He loves the stuff Cole is doing. He is for sure about this, and he's putting in the work, and he's showing the metrics, and he's putting up the numbers on the board. And hopefully he really is able to reach people and help people with that, because homie's killing it. And like I was saying, so it's really easy to forget about all of the real reasons why I even gave this a shot to begin with, which is I felt like shit. I was performing like shit. I was like, you know, atrophying from cutting so much weight and cutting so much calories. And I was just at my wit's end. I couldn't fast anymore. I didn't want to fast anymore, right? It's not that I couldn't. I did not want to anymore. And let this be a lesson, man. Like, hopefully Jerome from Finally Fasting, who I've been a long time follower of for like 3 years, 4 years now, hopefully this never happens to him. But there comes a point where you start, he's called it a fasting muscle. You don't want to go to the fasting muscle anymore. You're tired of it. The wells run dry. And I'm telling you, I've kept this weight off. There's never been a point ever since 2021 where I have hit a plateau and then backtracked, 15, 20 pounds. I have always hit new levels and then kept them. I pretty frequently post some of the only footage I have when I was super fatty. I was probably about 290 or something in the photo. because it was August or September maybe. Anyways, it was, sometime towards the end of 2021, summer, fall, winter, whatever. It's really irrelevant. But I began in 2021. I stepped on a scale at 350 pounds. 350 pounds. Size 46 pant, 4XL t-shirt. It hurt to bend over to lace up my work boots. I had to put my foot up to lace up my boots. Like a child with too many layers on in their winter clothes, having to get mommy to lace them up and put their gloves on. I was so fat. Going upstairs devastated me. And, breathing heavy all the time. So the first step was I knew I had to get rid of liquid calories. I didn't know much about nutrition. I was still under this vague assumption that just reducing the amount of meat you have a week is good because of cholesterol. Red meat kills you. Even chicken has trace amounts of fat, so it's not necessarily good. And so I began to sort of trade out, eating at gas stations at work and halal carts. And I began to eat more at home. I would eat a lot of things that I grew up on as an Italian. I grew up half in Italy and half in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I grew up in the part of Italy where they filmed Passion of the Christ and that one Daniel Craig James Bond movie. There's a city named Matera. I grew up in that province, in a town named Montescaglioso. And I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, just on the other side of the Ben Franklin Bridge from Philadelphia. That's where I went to school and my mom's house was. I relied on some staples that I knew were really delicious, and they were things like lentil soup cooked in a humble chicken broth with a little bit of bay leaf and some garlic powder and salt. I relied on things like fresh broccoli rabe, sauteed lightly in olive oil and just some tap water, finished with some salt and more raw olive oil, and drenching it not just in the olive oil, but dipping in with the sourdough bread, lots and lots of good bread. And I began eating like that for a while. I was making quite a number of pasta dishes. I was falling back on other staples I knew growing up, Italian sausage, meatballs. I started having some steaks, and then 2 times a week I would try and limit the amount of meat I was taking in because I thought that was overall good for my health. Around that time, I was, like I said, 350, and I began to, lose some simple weight from just not crushing 4 Arizona green teas every day. Just not taking in all of that liquid calories on top of the meals, it for sure did something, because I noticed by 2 months in or something like that, that my shirt was nice and baggy and I was having to add a hole to my belt. Suddenly, around April, I want to say, of 2021, I got my first scale and I got a Fitbit. I don't quite remember what inspired me to do so. But once I got the Fitbit and I began to look at the scale, by that point I was something around 290. And I started to gamify my daily schedule with getting those 10K steps. I don't know where it's from. I don't know how it got in my head. It's just part of the cultural, ether at this point. But from somewhere I picked up that nugget of 10K steps a day. And I started to gamify my work schedule, which worked nicely. And I began to eventually start walking to work, which was about 1.5 miles. And then eventually that grew to walking home from work. And then eventually that grew to, on my lunch break, going for a walk. And by August of that year, when that first gym selfie with me with the COVID mask on, from around that time, when I began going to the gym, I started waking up early and going to the gym 1.5 miles and then walking 1.5 miles home, having my first cup of coffee for the day because I knew coffee spikes cortisol and cortisol doesn't help with fat burning. I was following each nug along the journey. As the nugget presented itself, I eagerly grasped it. I went on to the next thing. I was drinking tons of green tea because I had found Thomas DeLauer, and he mentioned that things like apple cider vinegar and green tea, while in a fasted state, which was new and novel to me, would promote fat loss. The ECGC, I think it's called, the ectoglycine or whatever in green tea, and the acetic acid in apple cider vinegar, I want to say, it would help promote with lipolysis, and they would do the opposite of de novo lipogenesis, you know. And I doubled down on each of these things, picking up one nugget at a time, not all of them, not trying to do all the things, but one at a time, and going on to the next thing, and practicing it every day diligently while getting my 10K steps. And eventually my schedule became pretty beast mode. By the time I started getting into like 280 pounds, I would walk a mile and a half to the gym, get a little bullshit 35-minute lift in where I'd hit a couple muscles, and then I'd walk a mile and a half home, have my caffeine intake for the day, little prayer session, have 20 ounces of water with some apple cider vinegar, and then boom, out the door with my 32-ounce unsweetened green tea, or at that point it might have been sweetened with allulose, because even though it was early in the study period, there was some research to suggest that it could also help with fat loss. And I would run to the mile and a half to work on my lunch break. I would run 3 miles from Broad and Lehigh to Broad and Girard and back, and then I would run the mile and a half back to my house. And I very quickly became a 30,000 step monster every single day. And I began to do some of my first fasts. You know, I had a composition notebook that I would track these things in. You know, today I did 12 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours. Tomorrow I'm going for 24. I vividly remember my first extended fast when I said, you know what, I'm going to go for a full 2 days. I'm going to go for 48 hours. And I remember starting to get that first headache as I was coming up on 40 hours. And I had, of course, because I was a Thomas DeLauer fan, I had the Butcher Box subscription, and they were sending me some free grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef patties. And I had my freezer with a bunch of steaks in them, and I was breaking my fast with some bone broth, and I started to get that first electrolyte headache, you know, my first genuine experience of some keto flu. Even though I had experienced the keto diet, I had never had the electrolyte stuff, and now it was happening. And I determined that it was appropriate, even though it was not 48 hours, that I was going to break my fast. At this point, I was not aware of the language that's become very famous with Ozempic, which is called food noise. But the food noise was becoming overwhelming. And I decided that the best thing for me would be to just have some lean turkey after my bone broth. And I took a couple pieces of lunch meat and I started to snack on them, and I felt disgusted by the meat. And so I decided, okay, let me move on to something else. And I looked throughout my freezer or what else was there, and I saw the beef patties. And I threw one on, and I sizzled it up in its own fat. And I took my first bite of that with some mulled and smoked sea salt. Sean Baker, I am a Sean Baker follower in 2021. I am having mulled and smoked sea salt on my burger patty. I don't need a bun. I don't need cheese. And I took a couple bites on that sucker, man, and I'll tell you, the rich beef fat hit the fucking spot. It hit the spot. I was so happy with it, and I munched on that. And, you know, around this point, man, I'm living for the weekend. I'm doing 2 46-hour fasts. I'm getting 30,000 steps a day. The weekend comes, and on Saturday, I'm hitting Center City. I'm getting my little snack on. I'm going to have a slice of pizza. Then I'm going to go to DeBruno Brothers. I'm getting the chocolate budino pudding. You know, and I'm going through the treats. I'm having all my little morsels. And then the weight would be back up, and I would double fast it off, and then I'm living for the weekend, and I'm, you know, and it's going back off, and then it's coming back, and then it's going back off. And I don't know exactly what kept breaking the stalls, but I do know the persistence, the dedication that today I'm going to repeat what I did last week that was successful, and I'm going to examine what I did yesterday and the days before that was unsuccessful. And I'm going to continue trying. I'm not going to give up, was like the key. And eventually, I kept getting the weight off, man. I kept getting the weight off. I kept pushing through. I started challenging myself. This week, I'm going to get 40,000 steps, at least 2 days. There was one day in 2022 where I took a PTO day from work, and I challenged myself. I'm going to walk for 9 hours, and I'm getting fucking 50,000 steps. And, man, what a grind. It was like I had to dedicate so much of my week and of my day and of my life to this pursuit. And while it was worth it for me, there's so much I would have done different. If I had kept the same attitude and just sort of tweaked things, there's a lot more I could have benefited from it. And there was a lot of suffering. There was a lot of looking at that scale and going, what the fuck is wrong with you? What the fuck is wrong with you? There was a lot of hard looks in the mirror and having to reevaluate. Who am I? What am I doing? Where am I going? Anybody that's ever seen The Sopranos, there's towards the end of the show, spoiler alert, there's this scene where Tony's in a coma, and during this episode he's having, he keeps repeating the phrase, who am I? Where am I going? Who am I? Where am I going? And those were questions that haunted me for a long time. And I just couldn't break through this 260, 250 window. And the cravings were just gnawing at me. And for the first time, I found myself really starting to binge on some unhealthy foods. I found myself compelled to the point of having to leave my wallet at home so that I would not end up in the drive-thru of Taco Bell smashing 4,000 calories of food. And then on the clock, running home from work to grab my wallet to go get in line at Taco Bell on my lunch break. And I couldn't stop myself. And it started to trickle over and get bigger. And it started becoming things like door dashing from 2 spots to just kill the cravings. Finding myself getting 4 or 5 desserts from Cheesecake Factory, spending $80 on DoorDash, completely oblivious to the 5,000 calories I was about to smash as just a dessert. And the fasting was sort of exacerbating the food problems, the eating disorder. It wasn't helping anymore. And the healing that I had experienced and the empowerment that I experienced had stopped. And what I was unaware of at the time was that the journey was reaching a really dark place, both in my heart and in my body. Because not only was the fasting not working and I was getting burned out on it, but my overall wellness was changing. And that was when my romance with caffeine really started to ramp up. And so the video is coming close to about 20 minutes. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to pick up in, the 2022, breaking the 250 barrier. And when the caffeine and stim abuse starts to really ramp up from 250 pounds to 220. And the year that I stalled out for over a year, 16 months, yo-yoing between 220 and 230, finding myself with vicious eating disorders. And yeah. So that's it for today. We are trending back down on the sugar diet, the sugar fasting experience. I had some lean protein last night. I had a fucking killer leg day at the gym today. Loving the hack squat machine. I'm hoping by the end of the year to be 3 plates on that sucker. Just grinding out 3-4 sets. Maybe even more than 6 reps, We'll see. We'll see. Right now I'm starting to get close to the 20 piece on, 2 plates. So we'll see, man. But anyways, have a great day, guys. And I look forward to picking up with you guys tomorrow on the next couple of years in the weight loss journey. And eventually getting around full circle to talking about things that are really working for me and the joy that I'm experiencing on the sugar fasting experience and what it's like to be able to eat ad libitum and not gain weight. and then still have killer gym sessions, still have amazing productivity, and my overall wellness, well-being, and mood to be elevated without caffeine. Fantastic. Anyways, have a great day. Take care, and I will check in with you tomorrow.